All right, we're going to be working on kind of a weird combination here of chapters 12 and 13. And in order to really work on chapter 13, there's some stuff in 12 that we have to do. And if you guys notice how the assignments are set up, the assignments are set up so that you can build the stuff in chapter 12 and then use it in chapter 13. And the beauty of it is if you do chapter 12, you earn extra credit. And as some of you have already realized, the number of points that I put on the extra credit is equivalent to the number of points in chapter 14, where you could apply your homework coupon and therefore cancel that one out. So that's just a little strategy I'm trying to imply for you, or you could just do all of it and earn all the points. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to execute some of these steps here. Now, realizing that some of you will be installing SQL Server on your own. And if you've never done that, you should try it. And if you have already done that for your database class, you're kind of a couple steps ahead already. But basically what we're going to do here is we're going to skip over some of these steps, focus on some of the others. And basically the steps we're going to focus on are the ones that allow us to create all the tables that we need. And I'm hoping that this will give you some insight as to how to proceed. So I'm not going to be very step-by-step for this chapter. My real goal is to get the database in there, and this is the one that's going on the SharePoint server, so you guys can all connect to it if you wish, and then pull off of it. And then, who knows, maybe we won't really need all of it for chapter 13 anyhow, but at least we will have learned something along the way, or at least that's kind of the grand hope. Okay, let's go ahead and move this out of the way. And what I did is I went through the downloads that I got for the book, unzipped them, and then found my way to the resources section. And then you see that there's resources for chapter 12. And you notice inside there is a SQL file. And for any of those of you that have already taken the advanced database class, which I hope prior to coming to this class, you're going to look inside this file and notice right off the bat that basically what it is, it's a SQL file, which is really just a text file that contains a series of SQL commands. And if you look really carefully here, what it's going to do is run these commands as a script and create some tables, insert data, and basically build out the database table for you. So I'm going to go ahead through this process, but I will tell you that in order for me to do it, I am remoting to our SharePoint server, so I'm going to be running that in a remote desktop connection here, not something that you need to do. You wouldn't be able to even if you wanted, if you don't have credentials, obviously. But if you're doing this on your local machine, you should be running your SQL Server Management Studio on your local machine and then following along with the same steps. When you do get to SQL Server Management Studio, you will be presented with a screen when you first launch the product that looks like this that will ask you to log in. Follow these steps to proceed. My steps will be slightly different because it is, once again, a remote connection, and I'm not using Windows authentication. I'm actually using built-in SQL Server authentication to do these steps, which for our process is a little bit more secure. So the big process here is getting it installed, getting logged into your SQL Server, and then getting ready basically for step number 4. And right now I am connected to SQL Server on Gateway's SharePoint server. And the database that I'm connecting to is this one here. In fact, you know, I'm going to actually cancel out this process here, now that I'm thinking about it, and actually relaunch SQL Server on the server. And the reason I'm doing that is because I am going to log in directly here. So I'm putting in my username and my password, and then I am going to connect. Now, because I've kind of narrowed this account down, it should only have actual access to this database, which is the same name as my user account. That's not a mistake, that's by intent. Okay, so I am, at this point, logged in. So I am on step number 4 now on page 426, and it says after you log into the database, you should see the Object Explorer window. That's this window that we have up on the screen. And then we're going to right-click the database node. And I'm just going to tell you right now, the book says they want us to create a new database and call it Planet Rocks Temp. Okay? I'm not doing that. If you're working on your local machine, do it. I instead have already preemptively created a database called AAAA, which you guys are free to remote connect to, given the previous video that I showed you how to do that. Yes, Brian?
Are we supposed to be connecting to the same one?
For the moment, let me do this work, okay? So if we both try to run the SQL commands on the same database at the same time, it will, yeah, it's not good. But that's a good question. Yeah, if you want to do it on your SQL server following the book's instructions, please do it. Now, step number 5, and once again, the page number is 426. They want us to create a new database and call it Planet Rocks Temp. And then they also want us to pick a particular spot to store it. Now, they give you a path name of C/database. So right off the root of your C drive. And remember, programming books always do that because that way everybody's got a C drive and everybody has the same folder. But you can put it wherever you want as long as you know how to find it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring up the properties windows for this database because it is going to show you some of the same stuff that you're going to see on the screens that you're working with. It might be slightly different because I'm working, well, actually this is probably the same version of SQL Server now that I'm thinking about it. But what they're kind of trying to point out is where this stuff is stored. And I'm trying to expand my window to kind of match what you see in the book, but it's showing me where my stuff is stored. And then if you want to really dig down here, you can notice that the file name that I'm creating right here is matching the name of my database. So if you do Planet Rocks Temp, that's going to create a database file called planetrockstemp.mdf, and then you just take note of where it's being stored. I'm on a server, it's storing it deep into some server folders, but I know where to go find it if I need to actually do that. So part of what we're doing here, folks, is not only are we working with SQL Server, but we're actually creating that database file. If you're enterprising, you will figure out that that database file is also pre-created in the resource files, and you can actually just pull it in and use it directly. But I think it's useful to kind of go through this process too. So, all right. Once you've done that creation process, you go ahead and click OK, and then you'll get a thing here that will show you how to proceed. Okay, and I'll just show you all the resources that are kind of selected. All right. The next thing they want us to do is they want us to pull in SQL Server a script file, that same script file that I was pointing out before, and import it in. And the way that they do it in here is they tell you to do Control-O, which is just open file, and then you would go into your local resources and pull it all in. Now, keep in mind, I'm working on a remote machine, so my local files are not here at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and find a way to get my SQL file over to the server. But what you would do is you would find the location as indicated by your book and open it up locally and pull the file in. My process is a little bit more complicated, so I'm pausing the video while I'm making that happen. If you are connecting to this remote connection, please keep in mind you don't have to perform these steps because I'm basically performing them for you. Okay? So I'm pausing the video. All right, so I managed to pull in that SQL file, and I created a new query window as the book directs, and then I got all my SQL code that's in there. And what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to be running this script here in just a minute, and basically what that means is it's a series of SQL statements written into a script file. As soon as I hit execute or run the query, it's going to go through and hopefully build out the tables for me. So here we go, crossing fingers. And then I'm looking at the output window down below here to see if there's any errors. And I see the green arrow already. It says everything worked okay. And then one of the ways that I can tell for sure that it actually worked, folks, is I would come up here to the tables area, and then I should be able to open these up. And I created a genre table and a review table, and it shows me the columns. If I open that up, and then of course if you want to see what's actually inside there, you can run a query that would basically select the whole table and print it out. And at this point, to me, it seems like it worked, and hopefully you guys have that same capability now to take a look. So in terms of the stuff that we need to do in Chapter 12 to get ready for Chapter 13, we're already done, believe it or not. The rest of this chapter is kind of just showing you how the tools work and how to do some of it. And now that I've gone through this process working on the remote server, everything's coming back into my memory pretty sharply and focused that I didn't need to perform any of these steps. I could have just pulled in the MDF file directly for Chapter 13 and enrolled. You see how actually doing it reminds you of what you need to do. So just so you know that. But here you got to see me actually do it in SQL Server Management Studio. And if for any reason you have problems getting data from a local database file, you can always try connecting to this remotely. All right, I'm going to pause the video while I gear up for Chapter 13. All right, now we're transitioning over to working on Chapter 13. I do have my Visual Studio up and running. And I'm going to go ahead and work on the first try it out exercise in Chapter 13, which starts on page 457. And this one has us begin by opening up the website that we've been working on. And so at this point, I'm just launching it right from the quick launch menu here. I haven't been doing backups like I should be. You guys can scold me later, but that's just kind of how the weeks have been going lately. And here is my site up within the project here. They do want us to go into the master pages folder here, and it says add new item. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to add a new master page. Yes, you can do that. You can have more than one master page for a project. So select master page. Make sure you're in C# because that's our language. And they would like us to call this one Management Master. Like so. And make sure that you're in C# and make sure your code is in the code behind file. And then go ahead and click add. Now notice this is kind of interesting because we're adding a master page right now. Notice that I can take my master page and base it on a different master page. Okay, talk about going a couple levels deep here. That's kind of interesting though, because what that shows you is you can create a framework where like your basic navigation and structure are there, and then you might have a sub master page that has a little bit different layout, takes some of that stuff and incorporates it, and you can take that actually a few layers deep, and of course adds a different level of complexity to it, but that is a possibility. So go ahead and add that one. All right, we're going to be jumping down to step number 3 now, and inside step number 3, they want us to change the code that's inside the form element and replace it. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to basically strike everything that's already there, and I'm going to copy the stuff that's listed in step number 3 on page 457, which is basically a div. And if you're wondering what about the content placeholder, well, we are adding that back in. I am going to do a format here to make my code look a little bit nicer. And you can see we basically have a div here, and we're throwing in a couple of additional tags, including a new navigation area. Yes, you can have sub-navigation, absolutely. And then we're also still including a content placeholder. We're just putting it in a different structure here. All right, we're moving on to page number 458 now, and we are on step number 4. Can you repeat your question? And the question I was getting here in class as I paused was, where the original stuff I think went inside here, and keep in mind that they did have some code that looked, I think, either like this or identically like this. But what they're doing here, and I don't know if you guys are noticing that there's inline styles, not usually considered good practice, but keep in mind this is a master page. So that's maybe an exception where you could put some inline styles. But what should happen is the body section of your document should look like what I have highlighted here, which is basically from here to here. It does say give the page a title, and we'll put that up here, and it says Planet Rocks Management Home. Now I want you to keep in mind here that kind of what we're doing is we're actually creating a separate master page that will not necessarily be visible to the users, right, as implied by the name management. So like you will be creating websites as you work in your career where users might log in, and developing that part is a process. But then some users will have different access rights, so some users will be admins and will be able to come into these same interfaces that are slightly revised with different menu options that allows them to, as implied by this new navigation menu here, where you'd go to management home or manage genres. So in other words, the admin users could log in and go in there and change. They could add a couple different styles of music in here, or remove a couple, or change the names. That's the implication with all of this. All right. So now we're working on step number 4. And in step number 4, we need to actually create a separate folder. So let's go to Add, New Folder, right off the root of the site. And we're going to call this folder Management. Once you have the folder, we want to right-click, and we want to add a new web form. And let's actually use the Add New Item approach to do this, just because I want to make sure that we're in C# mode, because earlier I did the right click and we were in Visual Basic mode, and that always makes me worry that I'll create a code behind file that's the wrong language. So let's just make sure that we have that. What they would like us to call it is default. Well, that works out well. Yeah, don't forget, exactly, that was my next thing. Don't forget to select the master page, because now we are going to choose a different master page, and guess which one we're going to choose? The new one that we just created, right? So we're going to choose the management master. Go ahead and click OK. Once you're in here, you want to also make sure that you probably put in a title. Well, did they tell us what the title should be? Oh yeah, Planet Rocks Management Home. Again. And then they would want us to add a couple of things down to the content areas. So we're going to be working on the second content placeholder, the one with CP name content. And they got an H1 and a paragraph they want us to throw in there. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just tabbing those in so they'll look a little nicer. Go ahead and do a Control S to save these if you haven't done that already. Step number 5, they want us to create another page in the management folder once again. And this one, I'm going to be brave this time and choose web form with master and see what it does. And if it screws it up, I'll go in and fix it, obviously. But this one's going to be called genres. We are selecting management master again. And then for a title, they want Planet Rocks Management. And this one's genres. Then they want us to switch over to design view. And here's the point where they want us to pull in the Planet Rocks MDF file. Now, I am going to pull that up from the book's resources. This file is pre-created. In Chapter 12, we kind of went through the process of like the SQL Server thing where you maybe created it and maybe it's AAAAA and then you try to get that file and pull it into your application. In this case, I'm going to go to the book resources, find the source code for Chapter 12. I'm going to go into the app data folder and I'm going to pull in that MDF file. And what I'm going to do is, since I have my file window open, I'm just going to actually drag and drop this right in to app data, like that. And thank you very much, Google Drive, for spoiling my Friday here. It doesn't want to let me do that. But notice what it did. It still did it. So I'm not sure what that error message was about, but there's the file. Okay? One way or the other, it's in there. If that approach doesn't work for you, don't freak out. In other words, you get these weird error messages. I probably should have read what it said, but what the tools that I'm working with the new Google Drive file stream, which is the corporate, version of Google Drive, which does not like store locally anymore. So me dragging and dropping in this file, in some cases, might cause some problems. We'll find out as we go, obviously. Hopefully not. All right, so let's just keep going. And at this point, it says, let's move on to step number 7, and it says that expand the Planet Rocks MDF database. I'm just giving it a double click to do that, and you see Visual Studio. And I'm actually reading the error message this time. It says the database file is not compatible with the current instance of SQL Server. To resolve the issue, you must upgrade the database file by creating a new data connection, or you must modify the existing connection to this database file. Okay, so what it's telling me here is it is not liking that file right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do, folks, is I actually have the option where I could connect to that remote database that I was working with before, or I'm actually going to delete that file, and then I'm going to copy that MDF file to my local file system, because you see here, if you were to look at my path, it's on my Google Drive file stream, which is G. And what that means for the new Google Drive users that are using a corporate version, it doesn't store the files locally on your machine. So all of a sudden your permissions to control that file are different. Right? It's really goofy, and frankly, I kind of like the old Google Drive better, where it just is on my hard drive. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into that folder, and I'm going to find that file, copy it to my local file system first. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to come over, and you know what? I'm just going to throw it on my darn desktop. It doesn't really matter where it goes, as long as it's somewhere where I can control it. And then from there, I'm going to pull it into the Solution Explorer. I'm going to delete the old one first, switch back to the file window, and then just drag this one in, and it should hypothetically solve those problems. And I'm saying this like I'm confident that it's going to, but I'm going to tell you what, I haven't worked with Google Drive File Stream in this environment before, so that might not be the case. So you guys are you guys getting the same thing? All right. So I'm thinking that what's happening, this is just educated guess now, is we're working with Visual Studio 2017, and it has some database components automatically built into it and some not. It's not liking this version, and it's asking me to upgrade it. All right. So in the back of my head is telling me the only way that I can really do this is to pull it into a more modern database and convert the file. But I still have this confidence for whatever reason that I'm going to make this work. So as you guys look at the clock and go, we're running out of time. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to see if I can just kind of dig into it a little bit. Yeah, and what's happening here is it's trying to connect to this file. You notice how it tries to use an actual connection, and it's not working. So here's kind of my thinking. I'm actually going to try to connect to my remote server now instead. So I'm going to break this connection, and then you guys can follow this if you want, but just keep in mind that we might all be tapping into the same database at the same time. I don't think it should cause any problems. Usually SQL Server is pretty elegant that way. Let's just go ahead and delete this. And then I'm going to try to connect to our remote SQL server. And I'm noticing right now that it's actually not pulling in the tables. And do you notice what I just did? How I right-click and did a refresh? So what it's telling you is that the Server Explorer doesn't automatically go out there and ask for a refreshed version of the database, but by right-clicking that connection and choosing refresh, it reforced the connection to authenticate and then pull in the tables. So now you can see that the tables are actually there. Yes? Are you guys successful? All right. So that's kind of a all right. So that was step number 6 of sorts. So I do have this data connection kind of active here, and what I'm trying to do now is inside the Solution Explorer, I'm still seeing that MDF file was there, right? So I want to actually delete that. So I'm going to go back to Solution Explorer, and I'm going to delete this. Back to the Server Explorer, and then I'm going to see if I can actually just look inside the table and see what's there. So I just did that very simply. Did you guys notice I chose the table, I did a right click, and then there's an option to show the table data. And if you do that, you should be able to pull up the table right inside of Visual Studio and see what's in it. Now, this is actually very powerful, folks, what we got going on right now, because a lot of times when you're learning this stuff, you're usually connecting to your local connection. At this point, we're connecting to a separate server. It's running a separate database, not on your machine. And the reality is this is much more like what you would do in the workplace than not. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and actually close that. Then the next question is going to become, when we start to make the connection to the database, our procedure is going to be slightly different than what's in the book as a result. If you're running it locally, please follow the book directions to the letter. If you're doing the remote approach, then you're going to follow me. Okay? So I'm trying to figure out which step we're actually on here. All right, because step number 7 says expand the database, but our database now is in a separate window here, so I'm on the Server Explorer. And then drag it, and this is kind of interesting, then the tables node, so expand the database, then the tables node, and then drag the genre table from the Database Explorer and drop it into the CP main content area of the genres pages design view. You got that? So what they're really telling us is I'm just going to pick up this table and I'm going to drop it right into this box. And I'm releasing. And it brings up this interface. And hopefully you guys are getting this, I'm hoping. Right. And then you notice that the Smart Task panel kind of collapsed a little bit as I exited it, but it's still there if you need to pull it up. All right. And then it says here in step 7, Visual Studio creates a grid view and a SQL data source for you automatically. With a drag and a drop, it's a wonderful thing. Now, if you were to do it manually, that's where you would bring up your toolbox. You would go to the data tools here. You'd pull in a data grid view, etc. And you would make these connections. But what's happening for you, and you don't always see this, is it's forming these connections and doing it for you automatically. In the old days, we would hand code this stuff. Pain in the butt, really. These tools make it beautifully simple. It's not cheating. This is just the way the modern world works, folks. All right. Okay, step number 8. On the Smart Task panel for the grid view control, that should open it automatically. And if it doesn't, right, click the little arrow. And then we're going to do some tasks here. And it is not showing me the stuff I want to do. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to Control-Z that because I think when I first pulled it over, it did show it and then it disappeared right away. You guys, there we go. All right, so this is what we want to stay up on the screen. All right, so you can just redo the same thing that I did. All right. And the book is telling us to go ahead and check all the boxes that are shown in the figure. So enable paging, sorting, editing, deleting, and selection. What you're really doing here, folks, is you're saying not only are you bringing the data grid view, making a connection to the database, you're also flipping all these little boxes to enable what we call the basic CRUD operations and sorting on top of it all. So creating, retrieving, updating, deleting, and sorting. And these are tools that you probably see all the time and don't think much about. All right. Now, they want us to jump over to Solution Explorer now. And on the Management folder, this is step number 9, right-click that folder, choose Add New Item, and now we're going to choose Web Configuration File. And I'm looking for it in the list, but really we should probably just search for it. Oh, I just saw it on the screen and then it disappeared. There we go. And Web Configuration File, we do want to choose C#. You guys found it? Okay. And then notice here how it says Web Config. And then what's going to happen is it's basically going to drop things into a Web Config file that exists only inside that management folder. So it's a separate XML file that's created. And what we're doing here is we're going to add a little bit of code that's going to establish the theme, just like that. All right. Go ahead and do a Control-S on all the open pages. And then they are asking us to right-click and view in browser on the genres ASPX page. So let's check that out and see what happens. And I'm hoping it works here. And now, for as lame as this looks, right, because we didn't style it, we didn't do anything to it, you got to remember, this is a management interface. It doesn't have to look pretty. But notice what we can do. Well, first of all, I can sort, right? I can sort by whatever column. I can go ahead and edit, delete, and select. And I don't know if the book wants us to actually do that. It says the links in the left column enable you to edit, delete, and blah, 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 blah. And it says, notice you can't delete genres that have one or more reviews attached to them. If you try, you get an error. So I think that what might be kind of interesting, and there's 2 pages worth here, is find the genre that you really dislike and try to delete it. Or better yet, let's find one. I'm not saying I don't like reggae. But notice I clicked edit, and I can come in here. Something like that, right? And notice I was able to change that. Now the proof is in the pudding. I'll know that this is actually changed if I go back to my database, and it's actually changed on the database on the server. Because really that's what we just did. Now, if you guys have learned how to do database connections in other languages, right, think of like PHP, whatever, and you do it manually, and then you write code to do an insert and an update and a create and all these like weird things. Here we just dragged and dropped a connection over, automatically selected a couple of buttons, able to instantaneously put it on a page and make an edit directly to the database on a remote machine. Powerful, really powerful. Trying to delete. Well, apparently they let me delete that one because there were no reviews attached to it. But just so you know, that capability is there. Right, so that's our first try it out exercise, I believe. They show you how to do like sorting and edit. So I'm going to pause right now and see how successful you guys are. We did have a few people here in class that struggled with getting this connection to work, and what turned out to be happening, the error they were getting in their browser was saying that login for user failed or something to that effect. And what it turned out to be is that in the Server Explorer, even though it showed that the connection had saved the password, it wasn't actually saving the password. And the way that we figured it out was, I think we went, no, I forget exactly where we went, but whatever it wasn't saving. So what we did is we deleted the connection, recreated it, made sure that save password was selected, and it seemed to work. Unfortunately, folks, that's as much of video help as I'm going to give you with this chapter, but I will assure you that if you get it to work at this point, the other stuff follows pretty easily. So it really isn't that hard, but just please keep in mind how powerful and simple this technology is to be able to create a connection to either a local or remote data source, drag and drop the tools in, select a few boxes, and have this complete CRUD control over your database. Very, very, very cool and powerful. All right, that ends this video. See you next time.